Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new, I'm Yori. Welcome, I'm happy you joined me today. Today I am experimenting with the Urban Decay Naked Skin Shapeshifter palette. This is a powder and cream contour palette, and I have mine in the shade Medium Dark Shift. So I do have a demo for you on the palette as well as some thoughts on the palette, but before we go into the demo, I did want to show you some swatches and just give you some idea of why I selected the shade that I did. If you're interested in seeing my review and demo on this palette, then please just keep on watching. Alright, so this palette actually is a very nicely designed palette. It's very compact, which is the first thing that really appealed to me. The last product I reviewed of its kind was the Natasha Denona Sculpt and Glow palette, and that also is a cream and powder product palette. Here are the powder shades in the palette. You have two contour shades. Well, in the packaging, they refer to all three of these as contour shades, but this is really like a matte highlight shade, and this one is a true highlighting shade. So I'm going to go ahead and swatch all four shades in the order that they appear in the palette. The texture of the powders actually varies depending on the powder that you're looking at. Here you have your dark contour. They call this one a medium contour, this one a light contour, and lastly you have your highlight shade. So this palette actually comes in two shade ranges. The first one is called the Light Medium Shift, and it is supposed to be ideal for foundation shades 0.5 to 7.0. And then the Medium to Dark Shift palette, ideal for foundation shades 6.0 to 12.0. Now I happen to be about a 6.5. Right now I'm a little bit darker. I might be right at a 7.0. So for that reason, I decided to get the medium dark shift. Also, I've been getting a lot of sun this summer and I'm a little bit darker than I normally am. And so a lot of the contour products that I have right now are not as good for my current skin tone. So that's why I wanted to try something else and also add a little variety to my contour kit collection. All right, so now I'm going to swatch the cream products, and they are right there. This is your dark contour. This is your light contour, which you could barely see on my skin tone. There is a color corrector shade, which is sort of orangey. This is another color corrector shade. I used it as a matte highlight. And then there is a shimmer highlight, which you could really barely see on my skin. Okay, so a little bit more about the packaging. The 5 cream products are separated from the powder products by this mirror that folds, and it is a double-sided mirror, so you have a mirror on both sides, and you don't have to worry about the powders mixing with the creams, which is great. I did like that about the Natasha Denona contour kit as well. Now, this one, I love its portability. I think that this would be a really great item to travel with because you have your setting powders, you have powder contours if you prefer, but you also have the option to use a contour, a cream contour as well, which if you were traveling, you'd have to be carrying a lot of products for that. But here you have it all in one compact little palette. So I really like that. The price of this palette is $46, and it does come in 2 shades as I mentioned. Because I'm in between shades, I'm about an Urban Decay 7.0 right now. I decided to get the darker of the two. However, these are meant to go up to a shade 12.0 in the Urban Decay shade ranges. So it is meant also for deeper skin tones than my own. I was sort of right in the middle and I decided to select the deeper one because I don't have a lot of contour products that are geared towards deeper skin tones. So I figured if I'm ever doing one of my teammates' makeup or somebody else's makeup that has a darker skin tone than mine, I would also have something that would work for their skin tone as well. Alright, so let's go ahead and get into the demo of how I apply the products. Alright, so to give the absolute best impression, I want to use as many of the products as I possibly can. So I am actually going to go into the palette and I'm going to use this very orangey shade here, and I'm going to use it as a color corrector for my under eyes. I'm actually doing this prior to applying my foundation, so I will take a little break from filming after I apply this, and then I will come back to finish the rest of my face. So right off the bat, I noticed that it is very good at neutralizing the dark circles, but it is a very dark shade. There is a slightly lighter shade there, but I want to use that for highlighting. So I want to see how this one works for color correcting underneath my eyes, and then I will go in with a separate concealer. So far the product is really creamy, and it is going on really easily underneath. Okay, so at first the shade looked really dark, but it's actually blending in quite nicely. Alright, I don't really have any other spots to color correct, so I am going to go ahead and apply my foundation, and I will be right back to continue using the palette. Alright, so I applied my foundation, and for my foundation I used Born This Way foundation. So I'm going to go ahead and apply concealer underneath my eyes. Notice that the foundation didn't cover the color correction, and that's because I don't really bring the foundation up that high. I try to stay underneath so that when I apply concealer I don't have too many layers. I'm going to blend this out with my beauty blender. Now for the moment it doesn't really feel like the color corrector is interfering with my concealer in any way. I'm going to go ahead and set underneath my eyes, and I'm going to use this banana shade from the palette, and I'm going to set my eyes because I have more mature skin and my under eyes tend to crease, so I don't want to allow much time to pass by. Okay, right off the bat, the powder seems very finely milled. I usually use the Too Faced Primed and Poreless powder to set underneath my eyes, but this looks like it would be a nice alternative. I think it does brighten my eyes considerably. Alright, so now back to the cream products. I'm going to go ahead and try to contour with this darker shade right here in the palette. That shade does look quite dark. It's a little bit intimidating. I'm going to use the same trick I used when I was using the Natasha Denona Sculpt and Glow palette, and I am going to use a concealer brush. So that is quite the dark shade. Hopefully I won't have any trouble blending that out. I decided to purchase the darker shade from the two versions because I have gotten a little bit of color this summer, and I already have a lot of contour products for my natural skin tone, and so I wanted to have something for when I am a little bit darker. Hopefully I didn't overdo it with this. It doesn't seem to be moving my foundation at all, but I haven't started blending it out. Right now I'm just sort of mapping out where I would normally contour, and I'm not doing a very dramatic contour. Well, that one looks quite dramatic. So let's see what it looks like when I blend it out. Don't seem to be having any trouble blending that out with my damp sponge, so that's a good sign. Alright, this side is also blending out okay. Alright, so even though the shade looked quite scary at first, it blended out really nicely. So I can see why this is supposed to work for such a wide foundation range. I do want to try a nose contour, and for this I'm using another cream sort of shadow brush. This one is by Coastal Scents. This really looks bad. It looks really bad, but let's just blend it out and see what happens. Okay, to be perfectly honest, it almost feels like I just wiped it off with the Beauty Blender. It doesn't seem like it did much on my nose. I'm going to try to go in with a little bit more. This is the point of my nose where it's a little bit wider. I'm going to use a similar brush, it's just smaller, from Coastal Scents, and I am going to use the matte highlight. The matte highlight shade is this one right here, the second shade. I did not highlight with my concealer as I normally would because, like I mentioned, I wanted to really test out all the products, and I'm noticing that I'm very, very close to not being able to use these shades as highlights because they are almost, well, this particular shade rather, it's almost the shade of my skin. So you can, I don't know, you can barely see where I've applied it. So that's something to keep in mind if you're sort of in between shades like I am. Hopefully you're seeing how easily this is blending out. That's one of my favorite things. And I am going to go ahead and set those highlighted areas with the same banana shade. I am going to go ahead and apply the cream shimmer highlight, which is this one right here. Alright, this one is a little harder to blend out than the others. I'm going to set my contour with the darker of the two shades. Actually, no, I'm going to use the lighter of the two shades. The pans in the palette may seem small, but it is big enough to fit my Nars Ita brush. And this is one of the brushes I use most often for contouring, so that's good. Alright, I'm going to set my face with a little bit of my MAC Next to Nothing powder. I'm just kind of applying that everywhere. I'm going to try to use the last shade, this one here in the palette, for bronzing. My bronzer brush is a little bit big to fit in there, but because it does have that taper, I can get into that product and not worry about going into the other. So if you prefer a very large bronzer brush, this might not be a good palette for you. So I'm only going to bronze very lightly, again taking into account that that shade is quite a deep shade, so if you are like me and in between shades, just going in with a very, very light hand. The brush actually picks up a lot of product, but it blends out really, really nicely. And I know that Next to Nothing powder like really helps with that. Next, I am going to just add some blush so that I can add my highlight. For my blush, I'm going to use one of the ones from my Nars blush palette that I recently hauled. So I'm going to go ahead and apply the highlight. The highlight shade was one of the main reasons I selected this palette. That's this shade right here. It's a really beautiful sort of peachy pink highlight. I'm going to use this Tarte brush. It's not that different from the Shapeshifter brush that they recommend for this palette, but I don't own that brush, so I'm gonna try this one. I would describe this highlight sort of as a gold with a rose gold shift. Right now I'm applying it dry, but I will apply it with a damp brush as well. I swatched both of the highlights and I really, really like the one in the deeper palette. The one in the lighter palette is really nice too, but I feel like I have 100 highlights like that. Alright, now I'm wetting my brush with the Inglot Cosmetics Makeup Fixer Spray. I recently hauled that from my Las Vegas vacation haul and I wanted to try it out. Whoa. That really intensified the effect. Alright, so that is it for the application process. I'm going to finish the rest of my makeup. I did use 8 out of the 9 products in the palette, and so I will be right back after I finish my makeup and with my final thoughts on the palette. Okay, so hopefully the demo helped you see how the products apply to the face. I'm really, really happy with the product. I don't think it's a necessity, especially because if you're highlighting and contouring, you can obviously highlight with your concealer, and you only need one contour powder that's suitable for your skin tone, unless obviously you're doing makeup on a lot of different skin tones. And then a palette is kind of nice. I do like that it has a color corrector in this one. Both of them have color correctors, but because my dark circles are so dark, I really need like an orange color corrector, and the one I usually use is by Becca. But the one in this palette worked very, very well, and it was really similar. I would say that it was a little bit less emollient than the one by Becca, which is good if you have oily skin because it's not gonna move around a lot. So if you have more oily skin, I think that the cream products in here are just creamy enough to be blendable, but not so much that they are going to move around or break up. So that's just something to keep in mind. And also, you also have the powders in the palette to set the product with. As far as the shade selection, again, I went with the darker of the two, but I think that if you are in between shades such as I am, you really probably would do better with the lighter version of this. I'm going to go ahead and keep it because I plan on getting some more sun and a little bit more color, and also it just adds a little more variation to my makeup collection. Okay, so my final thoughts are it's a very nice palette. I do prefer the Natasha Denona Sculpt and Glow palette, which is a little bit more expensive. I do have a full review on that palette, which I will link in the cards if you're interested in seeing that. It's a nice product. It performs very well. I don't think it's a necessity, especially since you probably have a lot of highlighters in your collection and you have at least one contour product. Okay, that's it for this review. I will leave the product link down below so you can choose between the different versions. I also will link my video for the Natasha Denona Sculpt and Glow palette, which I honestly prefer, but it is a more pricey product. Alright, thank you for watching my review. I hope you enjoyed it and that you found it helpful, and it helps you make a decision between the shades, or perhaps look for alternative products if this one isn't something that you would be interested in. Overall, I like the palette. I don't think it's a necessity for all of the reasons that I already mentioned, but it's a nice addition to my collection and I intend to keep the product and continue to play with it. Thank you for watching my review. If you did enjoy it, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I also have a giveaway going on for my 300 subscriber mark, which the subscriber number has increased considerably, and I'm really, really excited about that. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't ever be afraid to experiment with makeup because you can always wash it off at the end of the day or immediately if necessary. I hope you're having a wonderful day wherever you are, and I will see you very, very soon on my next video. Bye!